What's up, guys? Swift here. I got my guy, Adam Mason, in the house again. This time we're talking our favorite prospects in the NFL draft. He's a guy who, like me, studies the draft a ton. Adam, go ahead and say what's up to the people, and then let's go ahead and talk some draft.
What's up, everyone, and bear down. We're back again. I love it. Swift is more of the draft expert. I'm more of the analytical guy, but I'll give my analytical 2 cents here and there, but happy to be with everyone.
So basically we're talking, I know you've studied some draft guys. You're going to downplay it, but I know you've looked into the draft. Are there any guys you think are just perfect fits for the Bears, or someone you want to talk about to get started?
Yeah, we've got to have a wide receiver. And a lot of people will disagree because we have DJ Moore, but outside DJ Moore, we don't have depth at wide receiver. And every good team has to have options, if not to take the pressure off of DJ Moore, to be able to open up the field for Justin Fields. And it's got to happen. Or for Caleb Williams. This isn't a Justin Fields video. We'll call it whatever it is. For whatever quarterback we have, we've got to have options to open up the field. So wide receiver, and this is the perfect draft class for it. You and I have both done videos on it. We both understand this is a deep class, and it's also a top-heavy class that's got some talent at the top that usually you don't have at classes. So yeah, I fully expect us to target a wide receiver before anything else in this draft class.
Yeah, 100%, man. And the class is so deep that we probably talk about so many names, but yeah, there's a lot of guys out there. Malachi Corley's a guy I really like. You can go any round, and there's going to be a guy out there I like. But there's other positions in need. We're kind of focusing. We're getting ready for free agency, but so far we don't know exactly where we're going to be narrowed down at this. So right now we're still kind of guessing. It's still early in the process. But there's still guys that stand out. Like for me, obviously, I love Marvin Harrison Jr. I love Jackson Powers Johnson. There's guys all over the defensive line, wide receiver position, and offensive line that I love. After wide receiver, where are you kind of focusing in on?
Yeah, the 4 things that I truly expect us to walk away from this draft with, like, even if we take in free agency, the 4 things I expect are 1, wide receiver, 2, a center, 3, a guard, and 4, a tight end. I expect, especially with Shane Waldron and his 12 personnel sets that he runs, sometimes I need to remember to say what the 2 tight end sets, to be able to have 2 tight ends in at the same time. Obviously, Cole Kmet is elite, but to be able to add another tight end to that would really do wonders for Shane Waldron. So I expect those 4 things, if nothing else, from the Bears: a wide receiver, center, a guard, and a tight end. Everything else, I expect, to add quality pieces in depth, best player available. But those are the 4 I really expect from this draft.
Yeah, I love it, man. I think we got to add a center, got to add a guard, got to add a wide receiver, probably got to add a defensive end at some point. Safety, I'm kind of hoping we go free agent route, but I could definitely see us drafting a safety as well, especially after the release of Eddie Jackson. So there's a lot of positions here, and quarterback to me is not in the top 5 needs. I think tight end, you touched on it as well. I like Noah Fant as a target in free agency, but when we get to the draft, I don't see one of those top guys coming here. But looking down in the draft, Jaheim Bell, or there's Sennett, there's a couple guys, AJ Barner late in the draft. I'd love to add someone like that to pair with Cole Kmet.
You're gonna get me on my on my pound of the table type of thing again.
Oh,
dude, Swifty, I love Cade Stover. I absolutely have fallen in love with him. He, to me, if we took him in the 2nd round, I wouldn't be upset one bit whatsoever. I would be elated. To me, Cade Stover ranks, now don't bash me for this. Nobody get on Swifty's comments and just go to town on it. Cade Stover's right up there with Brock Bowers for me. For Adam Mason, that's where Cade Stover ranks. And the biggest struggle we've had on the Bears is the drops, the hands. Cade Stover not only is he's not even huge, but he's a big body, but he's a bruiser. He used to be a linebacker. He's played multiple positions. And at Ohio State, they've refined him to be a tight end. They switched him from the defensive side of the ball and brought him to be a tight end. And since they've done that, it's not this crazy slow learning curve. Dude, he has taken off, and he doesn't drop anything. If you go watch his highlights, there's plays that are just like the Cole Kmet one in the end zone that Tyson Bagent threw to him. There's no way he should have caught that. Cade Stover has those all the time. I'm passionate about Cade Stover. I really want the Bears to draft him in the 2nd or 3rd round.
Cade Stover. So that's where you have him going, 2nd or 3rd round. That's what I was going to ask you next.
They have him going 3rd to 4th round.
Mm-hmm.
So the analysts, have him going 3rd to 4th round. Players that I target, I'm going to pat my own back here for a minute. Darius Robinson. It's one of the first videos I did back in November. He was a 5th round prospect back then, and I did some videos on tape before even understanding what I was doing. Darius Robinson, to me, was a 1st, 2nd rounder back then. Now, all of a sudden, it's the same type of thing where he's climbed the board. Same thing with Jackson Powers Johnson. I was tooting his horn back in the beginning of January because I saw what he was doing in the season, that he was a brick wall, that he didn't let anybody pass. He has a couple penalty issues, part of why he never lets anything through, but those are things that are easily correctable in the next level. It's the other things that are harder to teach. Getting the penalties reduced will be an easy thing. The same thing with Cade Stover.
Honestly, he was real quick. If you think back over the years, what would you rather have had? A guy who held someone on the offensive line and maybe got a penalty every now and then, but didn't get his quarterback killed, or the revolving doors who have just let guys demolish our quarterback? So I love him, Jackson Powers Johnson, for sure.
And it's an easy thing to fix too. I don't see that being a hard thing for line coaches to work with on him. But Cade Stover, he was the same thing. He was originally a 5th round prospect. People have seen how he's been improving the type of year that he had. He has a 0% catch or drop ball rate this year. He didn't drop a ball, not one, which, there's other players that have that too. But at the tight end position, when you're taking some hits and when you're going through it's pretty special if you watch him on tape. I really think he'll end up a 3rd round pick. If the Bears pick him in the 2nd or 3rd round, I'm not upset one bit. I really think he's that good, and he could be that guy where everyone was mocking the Lions, saying they took Sam Laporta too early. I don't think Cade Stover's quite Sam Laporta. Now that's a hard standard to match up to, because Sam Laporta had a great year, but I think Cade Stover is special in my opinion.
Yeah, we're not trying to say he's a Pro Bowl tight end his rookie year, but hey, that would be a killer addition to the team. And I love that you're pounding the table for Cade Stover. I honestly haven't evaluated tight ends that much, but I've watched a ton of Ohio State tape and watched every one of their games live this season. So I am very familiar with Cade Stover as a player and have seen him a ton. So I love that. Are there any other guys you're pounding the table for other than Cade Stover?
Tyler Nubin. I think this is
Tyler
one.
Nubin.
So you and I don't differentiate on a lot of things. And that's part of what I love about chatting with you, and is we don't have too many things we differ on. And I know you don't dislike Tyler Nubin. You're a big Cam Kitchens guy, and I'm fine with that. The problem I have with Cam Kitchens is the NFL passer rating. You know how I'm an analytical guy. His coverage grade, his NFL passer rating against him is over 100. And for a safety position, that's not good at all. That's bad. Now, if you look a year ago, it's the same thing as Caleb Williams, though. They know that he has the potential in him. And is that a coaching issue? And did he just have a bad year for some reason? Because last year, 2022, I'm referencing, because 2023 wasn't so great for him, but he still played really well, just not the same as his 2022 year. His 2022 year was special. But Tyler Nubin, to me, is a guy that I'm pounding the table for, but I don't know if we'll definitely go for a safety, because I see that being something we feel in free agency. And our defense won't command as much of this draft, in my opinion, as the offense. This is going to be a very offensive-centric draft for the Bears, which needs to happen. But to me, Tyler Nubin is big. He's still fast for his size, and he's a ball hawk. His coverage grade is around 40, which at the college level is crazy. And that's the hardest thing, and I'm sorry I'm rambling, but that's the hardest thing about the safety and cornerback positions in college and analyzing them, because that jump from the NFL is so different than every other position. It's hard to really analyze how guys are going to make that transition at cornerback and safety going from college to the NFL. It is different for them than other positions.
I love that.
Yeah,
I feel like
table for Tyler Nubin.
I feel like safety. Yeah, I love it, man. Tyler Nubin's a guy. So going into the Senior Bowl, I had him pretty much 1B to Cam Kitchens 1A, with Javon Bullard is my number 3, kind of just a step behind them. Now, obviously, I've talked about Cam Kitchens more because he was down there at the Senior Bowl and Tyler Nubin wasn't. But I do believe, for me, safety is one of the harder positions to evaluate on film. You have to have the all-22 footage, and then sometimes you don't even know what coverage they're asked to run. So it is pretty tough, but I do have Tyler Nubin right there with Cam Kitchens, but I haven't fully finished evaluating either one yet. So I'd love to hear that from you, that you prefer Tyler Nubin more. Currently, I do have Cam Kinchens is my top safety in the draft, but Newman is not far behind him. He's nipping at his heels for sure, at least.
And if everybody else values it the same way, then I hope we snag him in the second round, because either of those guys should go in the first round. They're both ball hawks. They're both solid safeties that I think will come in and start day one.
I'd love that. And I'd love to get a safety that can really take our secondary to the next level, because our secondary is so strong and the potential is so high. I think they could be one of the best secondaries in the NFL. You add a safety in there that can come in and get 3 to 4 picks a year. Woo, we're cooking.
And peanut punches and do their job in there. But I don't think we're lacking. Obviously, Jaquan Brisker has been, and dude, if I can sing praises to one player on our team, I love that mentality from Jaquan Brisker too. He's a guy that you can tell loves football. He eats, dreams, sleeps, and I can tell it's his passion when you just watch him and when you listen to him. Dude, I'm so glad he's our strong safety. Like, to have him in there every game, I love his progress. I think he's going to be one of the top safeties in the league this next year. I really believe that. He's got some things from year 1 to 2 was already big progress. I think he's going to be one of those guys that stands out this next year. He's really going to be one of those guys for me.
I love that. Jaquan Brisker is one of my favorite players on the team. I think him and Kyler Gordon together, bringing those guys in together, they elevate each other's game. They challenge each other. Yeah, Spidey. I love those two dudes. I think they're both potential Pro Bowl caliber players. So I love to hear that from you as well. I think Brisker, as long as he stays healthy and can avoid the concussion protocols and stuff, I think he can take his game to that Pro Bowl level. I see it too. I love that.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think now the Bears are good at cornerback, and I don't see any way that Jalen Johnson isn't a Bear next year. I do see us having to franchise tag him with what you hear, and this is just what we hear. Yeah. We don't know what the inner talkings are in there right now. I think they're working on it right now. I think that's one of the things Poles is working on. What you hear is he wants to reset the cornerback market. Is that reality? Is he just negotiating? Who knows? I think we'll end up having to franchise tag him and maybe get a deal done later. But with Tyreek Stevenson, that was a tale of two halves of the year, where it was really just rookie having to get experience, because his first half of the year, I think he had a passer rating against him of like 130, which is ridiculously high. But the second half, he ended up at about right around a 100 passer rating against, which isn't stellar. But when you take into consideration that 130 came down to 100, obviously the law of averages, I don't have the exact number, but it had to be somewhere around 70 or 80, which is really good for a rookie. Do you see us adding any cornerbacks? Because that's one thing I keep looking at right now. Only if we get more draft picks, but do you see that being something that we even attack in this draft?
I don't have it as a need at all right now. With 4 legit guys who I think could be starting cornerbacks, if you throw Terrell Smith in there as a number 4 guy, and then having some depth with Jalen Johnson and Josh Blackwell who can play special teams, and then some other guys they've brought in like Marcus Stroman or someone who could stick around. I don't see cornerback as a need really at all, but maybe if you can add someone in like the 5th round who's a guy you have graded as a 3rd round pick or something, and you can get another value and continue adding to this, especially if, like you said, Jalen Johnson ends up getting franchise tagged and we don't work out a long-term deal. Another Pole's going to be like, hey, I'm going to add another cornerback because you're playing with me right now and you could end up getting traded if you keep that up. For record, I'm hoping they get a long-term deal done at some point, but bottom line, he's not hitting free agency. If they don't work out a deal, Poles is slapping him with a franchise tag. I think Poles knows that. Jalen Johnson knows that. We both know that. If you guys should know that too. So yeah.
And you can do that. Now refresh me. I don't know everything. You can do that 2 or 3 times that you can franchise tag someone.
Recently, it's been limited that usually by the time they get the second franchise tag, most guys work out some kind of deal that I'm only signing this if you don't franchise tag me again. I'm pretty sure that's what I think it is.
Similar to what Chris Jones just did.
Mm-hmm. And he says he's coming back, though. I don't know if you guys saw that, but he said it at the Chiefs parade. For the people who want me to leave, I'm not leaving. I'm coming back, baby. So we'll see.
It's hard to do when you get that infectious championship in your blood. When you win champion, it helps retain guys. It does. And sometimes they'll sign for cheaper than they normally would.
You're at a parade and you got everybody cheering your name and you just won a championship. Why would you want to leave for like maybe a couple more million when you're already set up with generational wealth at that point, you know, like, what's it matter?
Yeah, I see the wide receiver, and I see us. I want to hit on this. I see us taking 2 wide receivers at least in this
The double
draft.
dip.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the double dip is something that Ryan Poles has shown he'll do it. He drafted 2 DBs his first year with Brisker and Gordon. He drafted 2 corners this year with Terrell Smith and Tyreek, and the 2 defensive tackles.
Yeah, I was shocked. The one thing I was shocked last year in the draft when that happened, I didn't see us taking Zach Pickens. I had my board. I'm pretty decent on where we're heading, what we're doing. But when he picked a second defensive tackle in a row, I was like, I really thought that was going to be wide receiver. I
thought it was going to be wide receiver or defensive end. I had defensive end high too. I thought we could take a defensive end. And when he went 2 defensive tackles, I was like, they made it pretty clear they wanted to improve the interior. And that's one reason I doubt we draft a DT high this year, like some people think.
Yeah, I don't think we draft one at all. When you've taken 2 young guys like that, that's a lot of people are hitting on that, and they even think, well, we'll get one in free agency. If we do, I think it'll be a lower level or a prove it type of deal, defensive end. And I've talked about I'm blanking on his first name, but Hurst out of Cleveland. So Maurice Hurst is a guy that's really, really good talent, and he puts up good numbers, but he gets eternally hurt. So if we do add someone, I see it being a cheaper contract like that, where he's on a prove it deal to help these 2 rookies see if they can make the leap in their next year. Because he's not just going to give up on a second and third rounder in this year. He's not going to go out and draft a Jerzon Newton as much as some people might want, unless he's really thinking Jerzon Newton is like a Jalen Carter type of talent that people aren't seeing. And hey, we've got this pick here at 9, and nobody else sees what we see in him, and we think he's going to be Chris Jones from day one. Anything can happen, but I really don't see him giving up on 2 rookies, second-year players now in their second year. I see more complementary roles coming in, and people have to understand how many players you carry. We really don't carry more than 4 defensive interior guys, especially when you have a 5th, DeMarcus Walker, who can rotate in on certain sets and play defensive end and defensive interior. So that's why I like a guy like Darius Robinson. When I started doing video on him, he's got that size. He's 296 pounds, and he's got the length. He can sit out on the edge, but he can also come into your 7 gap and your 5 gap. He can play different spots. He can even get into the 3 tech. And so there's different spots that Darius Robinson can fill, kind of like DeMarcus Walker, where they're valuable for different reasons, where you're really carrying 9 defensive linemen. And to have those guys that can rotate in and out and be able to mix things up on sets, that's valuable. So I see us taking someone kind of like a Darius Robinson, where he can play edge and we can see what we have out of him before next year's draft. But it's not a huge need this year. We talked before about DeMarcus Walker and how he changed with Montez Sweat coming in. So I don't see either of those being something we highly focus on.
Now, I agree with that 100%. I think D tackle is a position where they've obviously proven they value it highly, but I don't see them moving on from either Zach Pickens or Gervon Dexter, especially with the improvement they put the second half of the season. And Flus talked about it even more. He talked up Zach Pickens' improvement as much as Gervon Dexter. And I think those guys going forward with Andrew Billings still here on another 2-year short-term deal, I think potentially we could add a guy, like you said, a Maurice Hurst, or a somewhere between round 3 and 6. You could add someone in there maybe, like they did this year. They still drafted Travis Bell in the 7th round, but I don't see a high pick. A lot of people are connecting Jerzon Newton. They're like, oh, we need Jerzon Newton. We need that 3 tech Swift. We need that 3 tech. And I'm like, that's Gervon Dexter. I think that's the thing. People, if they add an edge though, that, like you said, DeMarcus Walker, a guy who's played well, he's a guy who could just easily shift over to 3 tech a little bit on situations as well. So it's something where I don't see 3 tech is as big of a need as most people.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Gervon Dexter, to me, I want to be in the war room when they drafted them last year, because if you take Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens, you've got a top 10 defensive tackle in the league if you combine them together. Now that's a hot take by Adam, but Gervon Dexter, his run defense grade was 36.2 this year, which is extremely low. And you see how the Bears rotated them in. You can only predict so much, but when the offense is going to run, pass plays and defense plays, or pass plays and run plays for the most part, they rotated in, because Gervon Dexter's missed tackle percentage this last year was 20%, 1 out of every 5, which for an interior, you're going to miss some more because you're being blocked, but not that much. Zach Pickens was much lower. So Zach Pickens plays that they played, he was in for 148 pass plays and 115 run plays. Gervon Dexter was in for 134 run plays, but 297 pass plays. So they intentionally tried to have Gervon more on pass plays to get that pass rush, but Zach Pickens was a much stronger run defender. Yeah, so I'm super hyped to see what Travis Smith and Eric Washington, what they do when they come in with this defensive line, because to them they got to be salivating at looking at the perks that both of these two young defensive linemen had and the potential they have. So I'm really excited to see what this new coaching staff can do to work with these young guys.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. I think that's a point that's overlooked a lot here is Eric Washington is a guy he was a defensive coordinator, but he's a defensive line specialized coordinator that's something that Matt Eberflus was more of a linebacker guy, kind of a secondary guy. We got John Hoke, who's been a specialist in the secondary for a long time. But now let's get more out of these defensive linemen. Let's develop these defensive linemen. And I think that's something that Eric Washington can play a huge role out of. Get more out of Gervon Dexter, get more out of Zach Pickens. And then that's why I think it is possible we add an edge some point on day 2, though, as well.
Yeah.
If someone
I think that's specifically why he was hired. I think to complement Eberflus's strengths, to bring both of them in, I think that's 100% why he was hired.
Nailed it, man. And I love it. So we love the NFL draft. There's a ton of prospects we could talk about. Is there anyone else you want to bang the table for?
Okay, so wide receiver 2 in the draft. So I think we're kind of on the same page. We both love Marvin Harrison Jr. as our one. I'm not going to be upset if we get Neighbors or Odunze as well. I do want a big X receiver that can push off the line and can take that contact off the line and work through and break through those. I want a big, tall guy. I like those high point guys, so I love Odunze for that. His contested catch rate in college this last year was over 70%, and I need to double check it, but he's one of the only ones that had that high of a contested catch rate. So there's some uniqueness to Odunze. But your second wide receiver taken, I was high on Brendan Rice early on in this stage, around week 14 and 15. I was very high on Brendan Rice. Who do you see as our second? Let's say Brendan Rice, we're not taking a wide receiver round 3. Who are you taking round 4 and on? Who do you like past round 4 for a wide receiver if we take one then?
Okay, round 4 and on wide receiver. So Malachi Corley is probably gone by then.
Other people aren't
Malachi Corley is there. He's my guy. He's Deebo Samuel-esque. I absolutely love that guy. So
just to jump in on that,
go ahead.
He's jumped up. Malachi Corley has jumped up from the hundreds. He's now consensus. I do a consensus, try to combine them all. He's now consensus about number 86. So that would be in the 3rd round. So he's obviously showing off to people, and they're seeing the same thing you're seeing. He's showing off, and I think he's.
If I can get Malachi Corley I'll take him in round 3.
Yeah,
I'll take him with the first pick of the 3rd round. I'll trade up. I'll trade a 6th or 5th or 6th rounder to trade up in the 3rd and get Corley. That's a guy I love. I think Xavier Legette is probably a round 2 guy, but considering he came in at 6'1" instead of 6'3", there's a chance he could fall a little bit.
How tall is DJ Moore? 5'11"?
Right around 6 foot, I think.
Xavier Legette to me is DJ Moore 2.0. Nobody else is really saying that, but I really believe that he is.
I don't see
elusive.
The speed.
So he's not as fast. You're right. But what he does after the catch and the way he manages his body and runs like a running back, it's something not a lot of wide receivers do. So Xavier Legette to me is that type of guy that I would trust getting the ball. You see all these bubble screens and the stuff we were running before, which hopefully is going to be reduced and cut down quite a bit. But if we are running that crap, you get it to someone like him who has a high contested catch rate, so he's not going to be, and he has a low drop ball percentage. He would be someone I trust to bowl some people over and act like a running back in those situations.
I love that. I think that's what Malachi Corley's built for, to be honest. Yeah. And then I'll just throw a couple other names out there. I don't know how much you watched of them, but Roman Wilson, absolutely electrifying.
Okay, Roman Wilson, again, quick, but 2.4% drop the ball rate, which is one of the lowest, and 60% contested catch rate. Roman Wilson is a complete package to me, too. I love Roman Wilson.
I love that you said it because I saw that at the Senior Bowl. He caught pretty much everything thrown his way and separated him. Where a guy who I thought was going to show out was Tez Walker, and he dropped
Yeah.
everything. So he's fallen down
And
my
Tez
board.
Walker, that's the
Go
thing.
ahead.
Tez Walker had a 6.8% drop pass, so it wasn't crazy low or wasn't crazy high. But then you see that, and you're like, "Oh man, are we not seeing the whole picture here with it?" It makes you question him, and that it definitely raised. It dropped Tez Walker, and it raised Roman Wilson for me. Those are two that went the opposite direction for me. Yeah.
Exactly. Same thing at the Senior Bowl. They did that. And then another guy who I was already really high on going into the Senior Bowl, but he's a guy, well, a couple slot guys first before I mention this guy. Let me go Luke McCaffrey and Ricky Pearsall. If we could get one of those guys in the round 3, round 4 area, a perfect slot weapon to come in here and help out the offense. And then the guy I want to talk about that I want to get your opinion on is one of my favorite sleeper guys is Javon Baker from UCF. This guy he's electrifying. He's a playmaker. I love what I see from him, and he's so much further down the board than most of these other guys. Do you have anything on him?
So I don't. So here's the thing. I just barely heard you start talking about Javon Baker. So I overlooked Javon Baker, number one, because UCF, and that doesn't mean everything, because I also am hot on Hayden Hatton for different reasons. But his drop percentage was 12.2%. And so automatically with where the Bears are in their situation and how many bad drops we had this year, that's not the focus of this, but every other receiver outside of Cole Kmet and DJ Moore had 13% or worse drop percentage. And that's awful in the NFL. So if he's having those problems at college, I overlooked Javon Baker. So he's someone that I honestly overlooked. So you mentioned him, and I just saw that in the last couple of weeks. And it's someone that I want to take a deeper dive into because I wasn't at the Senior Bowl. I didn't see all those things, but he's someone that interests me after what you've been saying. He's someone that I want to look more into for sure.
And that's the thing with this wide receiver class. Like you just mentioned, a guy I haven't put too much work in, but there's guys all up and down it. You can go to day 3 and you're going to find guys like a Taj Washington or a Malik Washington or Jaquan Jackson or Joshua Cephas. They're just dudes everywhere. This wide receiver class is stacked, and that's why I think we're both in agreement. We want Poles to go back to the double dip, but do it at wide receiver this time. Maybe even bring in a third one like you did at defensive tackle last year. But take some shots at wide receiver because that's the one position other than DJ Moore, he hasn't got it right yet and needs to add some talent.
Yeah, and I'm gonna hit that with Poles because a lot of it. So he said at the end of your presser, and I loved it, that he got support from the organization to keep taking your shot because people are hard on him for the Chase Claypool thing. But it's easy. Hindsight's 20/20. It's easy to look back and say, well, you did this wrong. But the reality is Chase Claypool is a big body, big wide receiver that has so much potential. But if you look back at the last free agent class and who was available in trade and the last wide receiver class, even when Velus Jones Jr. came out, it's hard to hit on a wide receiver outside of round 1. And where were we in our drafting? We had a complete rebuild to do. We weren't in a position to take a wide receiver in round 1 or 2 or barely even 3. We took Velus Jones in a class where wide receiver in the 3rd round really wasn't strong. Those classes, there weren't many great players in them. So he, out of necessity, he did the best he could. I'm not done with Velus Jones Jr. I don't think Velus Jones Jr. is going to be your home run wide receiver 1 or 2. But what they're doing lately with putting him in the backfield and running sets with sweeps or motions, you see a lot of the stuff the Niners are doing, and I can see him filling some of those roles with his body size and his running speed to be able – I mean, Getsy did it last year and got 10 yards and then went away from it the rest of the game for some reason, decided 10 yards wasn't good enough on one play. We're not going to do that again. But he's got some value on the team as a wide receiver 5 or 6. But
yeah, no, I agree with that. He's got a ton of speed, and we just need more production outside of DJ Moore. And I think bringing in a new wide receiver coach this year as well, DJ Moore's former wide receiver coach, I think that's going to help out. Hopefully we can get some production. And I think that also leans towards, please, Poles, just listen to us this one time, draft some wide receivers because we need them.
I hope there's someone that can really evaluate that wide receiver talent and nail it for us, because I'm confident we'll nail the first one. We're gonna get a top tier wide receiver, and that gives me comfort. But this range you're talking about, that third, fourth round, I mean, there's so many guys right now projected between 80 and 120. It's ridiculous. Starting with Brennan Rice right now, who I think will go higher than 80, but he's right around 80. Roman Wilson now is at 69 on a consensus. But then you got Johnny Wilson. The reason we talked about this earlier, I didn't give you my reason. The reason I wasn't hot on him is during the season, 11.4% dropped rate. Jamari Thrash, 11.3%. Jalen McMillan, 16.7%. That's some reason that some of those guys dropped for me on my board. I'm really turned off, and it's recency. It's because of what the Bears have had issues with right now. I'm really turned off to those guys that are dropping. And before anybody nails something on Marvin Harrison, I'm a space case. I'm going on tangents. Marvin Harrison Jr. had an 8.2, but he was his hardest critic. The one game he had 3 drops in one game, and it was like a downpour game. It was raining like crazy. He had 3 drops. He was his hardest critic. You take that one game out, and he's got a 3% drop rate. And that's stuff people have to look into because it's not just what's on paper. It's consistency. When you look at Johnny Wilson, he's got 2 drops a game on 4 different games. And that worries me. I don't want that in Chicago. I like his height. I don't want that. But there's a lot of guys that this class, we can definitely hit someone in that third round range between 80 and 120. And I really hope there's someone in Hallis Hall that's specializing on wide receivers because I would love us to come away with the Puka Nacua or some other, hit player, Tank Dell, or someone in the third round that can be right there along with DJ Moore and Marvin Harrison Jr. for us.
Yeah, and it's just like you see these guys and you're like, oh, yeah, Malachi Corley, he shouldn't go in the third round. Neither should Brandon Rice. But then you look above it. There's so many wide receivers I've barely even talked about. Like, I haven't even mentioned Troy Franklin or Xavier Worthy or Jermaine Burton. There's guys I talked about Keon Coleman. Mitchell. Yep, I talked about Keon Coleman a ton early. Brian Thomas is a guy who Brian Thomas could go as high as 15th overall, I believe. He's a lock to go in the first round. And to me, he's wide receiver 4. But with the top 3 and then all the talent below, some of those guys in the middle, the Keon Coleman, the Brian Thomas, Donnie Mitchell, those guys are just getting overlooked. And that's what's pushing those other guys down, though, is there's so much talent. Xavier Worthy was a guy who most people had as a first-round pick heading into the years. He could be a third-round pick. This wide receiver class is stacked beyond my mind, and it just gets me so hyped.
Yeah, great year to need a wide receiver. Great year for teams like the Colts and the Panthers who don't have the highest pick to get those top guys that are still going to end up with a Brian Thomas or a Keon Coleman or a Donnie Mitchell. Like, this is a deep wide receiver class. That's what makes it so exciting is that we could snag 2 or 3 of them for sure.
And that's what I want most. It's like no matter what happens with the first round, who you end up getting or on the first day or two, day 3 and late day 2, once you get to round 3 through 5, there's still going to be a ton of talent at wide receiver because it's the most stacked position in the class. We got to take some shots there, man. And I love it. I'm too excited. Yeah.
So you asked about pound on the table. I know we're not going to take too much more time here, but at center position, our other big need, we've talked a little bit about it, but Jackson Powers Johnson to me is the clear number 1. His sack hit hurry, so his pressures, 1 every 458 snaps, which is how many snaps he took at blocking this year for pass blocking. That's unheard of. It's unreal. But the other 2 guys that I really like that I wouldn't be upset, even if we picked up 2 centers, if we don't get one in free agency, which I don't see happening, I see us picking up a free agent center and drafting a center. Even if we don't pick up a free agent one and we get Jackson Powers Johnson and still pick another one up, Zach Frazier had a 51.3. So 1 every 51 snaps, which is crazy good. For example, Graham Barton, who a lot of people are hot on in the first round, 1 every 23 snaps. And that's a turnoff to me. That's why I'm not hot on Graham Barton. And to me, the big reason for necessity for him is he's got shorter arms, and that's why he's moving back to center. He played some center. He's been playing tackle as well. But then the other guy I really like is not Cedric Von Prawn. A lot of people are hot on Cedric, and they've come down on him because his year wasn't as good. So he's not my number 3. My number 3 is going to surprise you. It's Drake Nugent.
Ooh, Drake Nugent does surprise me. With only 1 year as a starter at center, I think that was one of the things that I was down on him on. What's your thoughts on Drake?
He had a 50. 1 every 50 plays a sack hit or hurry, which was number 3 in this class, only behind Jackson Powers Johnson and Zach Frazier. But his pass block and his run block grades are both spectacular, up in the above 75 for PFF grade, and then he only had 1 penalty all year, which was among the top of all centers. Which to me, let's get that straight. That's not as we talked about before. That's coachable. That's not a huge deal. But he's clean, and he did such a good job in this 1 year that I really like what I see so far from Drake Nugent. And right now, he's considered about pick 140. So if we picked him as a backup, as a second center, I'm actually really excited about where that could be as a backup for sure.
I like it. So Drake Nugent was a guy I actually talked about him going into the playoff championship series, that once the playoffs started in college football, because he was a guy I was like, hey, I'm going to watch these teams closer in the playoffs. And I wanted to know how my problem with him. I'm going to go against you for the first time. I got to try to go against you a little bit. They just don't pass the ball. So it's like, how you're not going to give up many pressures per snap when your team just pounds the ball. And when they do run the ball, I felt like, or when they did pass the ball, it's not that they never pass the ball. It's their coaches were so good at mixing in the pass and using play action that they usually caught the defense off guard. So the guys weren't pinning their ears back anyway. I felt like it's really hard to evaluate really how good he was and how good they were just at pounding the ball down people's throat and taking the will out of other teams. It made it hard for me to be like, I like Drake Nugent, because early on I was like, hey, I see this guy climbing my board. But once we got to the playoffs, and then I also think he got manhandled a little bit against Georgia, I was just like, I don't know where I'm at with him right now. So I'm just gonna say, for me, I definitely have Bo Limmer and maybe Bortolini from Wisconsin. I have those guys above him for sure.
My biggest struggle with Bo Limmer, though, is he's only got a 61 grade on his pass blocking. And just to be clear, the sack hits and hurries, those pressures, they only count on the passing plays. But what you said was important for Michigan. What you said was important.
I didn't know that. I thought you were just saying. I thought it was just by play for sure. So yeah, that's
it's just by passing plays.
Okay.
But what you said was important because Michigan does do such a good job of mixing it up that they do get teams off guard. And that's my same thing with Zach Zinter. I love Zach Zinter. I am a huge, to me, he's my number one guard, which that'll surprise you.
I'm really high on him too. That was another point I forgot to mention, was he also played right next to Zach Zinter, who helped him out a lot and kind of could cover up his weaknesses. So for me, it was like, it's just hard for me. It was hard for me to judge Drake Nugent. I obviously haven't finished scouting him yet, but right now he's a question mark to me.
One of my favorite mocks that I did was taking both of those two together, Zach Zinter and Drake Nugent. I think that would be kind of fun. I don't see that being our starting tandem. I don't see that but it would be kind of fun to have those storylines. That's fun for me. So
no, I like that. I always like getting teammates as well. I kind of, even guys who just play the same position or similar, like two interior offensive linemen, or like last year, 2 interior defensive linemen. Pickens and Gervon Dexter weren't teammates, but they both played in the same conference, and they traveled together during the pre-draft processes and stuff. So they were guys who already had a relationship. I like pre-built-in chemistry is always a bonus if you can add that, for sure.
Yeah, that's fun. It's always good to have the chemistry build. I did a whole show on that about continuity and chemistry, and that to me makes things exciting for the Bears to build this team with potential connections like that. So,
I love it, man. Hey, Adam, we could probably talk all day, man, because I love talking football with you. This is the most fun I've had chopping it up with someone in a while. Did you have any other final points on Bears? Any other favorite guys that you pound the table for, or did we hit them all?
No, man, we hit the majority of them, and there's going to be a lot that comes out after the combine too. We're both going to have a lot to say with that. It is just a lot of fun to chop it up with you, because I think we think so similar about so many things. So it's fun to be on here with you, man.
Man, I appreciate it. Adam Mason, guys, check him out at Adam Loves Sports on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to Adam yet, I know a lot of you guys have because you already told me. But if you haven't, make sure you check him out. Like, he's already just getting started over there. Not just, but we already told that story a little bit.
No, really,
but, he's new, and go over there and give him a sub. Hit that like button. Tell him I sent you if you want. But go over there and give him some love. Come on, guys, just do it, please. Don't make me get violent.
Hey, Swift, thanks for having me on, man. It's fun to chop it up with you. We'll have a lot more as we come into the combine and into the draft and stuff like that. So, are you headed to the draft this year?
I don't think so. I'm either going to be live streaming from home, or I might go to Chicago for the draft party with Just Another Year Chicago. Nick Rohde, he does like a draft party, so I might go to that if I'm able to.
And he's like, dude, I didn't realize this was actually turning into something for you. So.
That's the bet, bro. It was someone on my I think it was my mom. Someone messaged my mom because I think my older sister was at someone's house and they just put it on the TV and they had no idea like my sister was there and like they're watching the video. Famous. I'm just like, if you think guys fit the Bears really well or just dudes that you want to talk about.
Dudes,
talk about dudes, bro. That's what we do. That's what we do.
Don't paint me out to be something other than what I am, man.
Hey, I got Adam Mason here, and he wants to talk about dudes.
All he does is talk dudes. That's why he wanted a sports talk radio.
Hey,
dudes.
Hey,